Welcome to FISM News. I'm Samuel Case.
And I'm Renata Kiss.
And tonight, the DOJ shares a letter from Trump's would-be assassin.
Meanwhile, Volodimir Zelenskyy rallies UN support for Ukraine.
And a potential port worker strike threatens chaos in the economy. And we begin with the update on the Trump assassination attempt, where the Justice Department is receiving blowback over its latest decision to release a letter written by Trump's would-be assassin offering a reward for someone to, quote, complete the job. The DOJ released that letter in court filings yesterday. In it, the attempted assassin, Ryan Ruth, said, quote, "This was an assassination attempt on Donald Trump, but I failed you." He then offers, quote, $150,000 to whomever can complete the job. That letter was discovered in a box of ammunition Ruth sent to an unnamed witness a few months ago. Donald Trump Jr. says that by releasing it, the DOJ has put his father's life in even more danger, accusing it of posting what amounts to a bounty on the former president. Likewise, former Trump Attorney General Bill Barr also slammed the decision, calling it a rash decision that served no purpose other than to risk inciting further violence. That's an opinion also shared by CNN legal analyst Eli Honig.
I don't often agree with Bill Barr, but I agree with him here. What the feds could have done in their brief, and I read it, it's a powerful brief, is just say, we recovered a letter from him, from his possessions, where he says this was an attempted assassination. That's it. Instead, they publish the whole letter, which to somebody who's unbalanced or dangerous could see that as some sort of call to arms. So I disagree with that tactic by the feds. I think it's counterproductive.
And considering the Secret Service, a new study shows their approval rating has plummeted to a 10-year low. Gallup poll's recent survey showed that only 8% of respondents thought the Secret Service was doing an excellent job, while 36% thought they were doing poorly. The organization's approval rating fell by 23 points after the first attempted assassination of former President Trump. Negative sentiments toward the agency rose at that same rate afterward. But the Secret Service is not alone in its bad ratings. During the pandemic, the CDC's approval rating fell by 23 points, while back in 2009, during the economic recession, the Fed's approval rating likewise fell by 23 points. However, the one agency that consistently gets a positive approval rating is the U.S. Postal Service. Since 2014, when Gallup first included the federal agency in its surveys, Americans have rated the USPS the highest among all government organizations.
And turning now to today's election update, where both campaigns are pushing hard in the state of Pennsylvania. It's shaping up to be one of, if not the most important swing states of the year. Donald Trump made a stop in western Pennsylvania yesterday for a roundtable discussion with local farmers, many of them sharing their struggles in the current economy.
Fertilizer is up 30 to 60% in 2024, not to mention the increase in seed cost, the fuel, the parts and supplies, and man hours for planting. Electric has doubled from around $400 a month in 21 to $800 a month this year, just to run some equipment and the lights that doesn't include heat. Just last week, a local dairy in operation for over 65 years announced the closure of their bottling operations due to rising costs of supplies and down demand. Other farms in the area have declared bankruptcy or sold off property and downsized.
In turn, Trump suggested several solutions, including tax breaks for Americans trying to buy farmland and also renewed efforts to lower energy costs.
We are going to do a real job. We need the support of Pennsylvania. It's a very important state, and she is not going to be good to Pennsylvania. Between pricing and energy, we would be at least 3 to 4 times more production of energy right now, and your prices would never be what they are because you can't compete when you have to pay that much for energy.
Trump also suggested placing tariffs on foreign products in order to protect American businesses. He made a point to highlight the steel industry specifically, which still remains a major source of jobs in the state of Pennsylvania.
I think the steel people like me the best. Unfortunately, Biden's let it go. I put tariffs. They were dumping Chinese steel into our country, David, at levels that nobody's ever seen before. We've never seen anything like it. And I put a 50% tariff on all steel coming in from China and some other places too, but all steel. And we saved these companies, but Biden has let it go.
More controversially, however, Trump also suggested tariffs on John Deere for making its products in Mexico. Those tariffs could potentially drive up costs for farmers who rely on John Deere's products.
Meanwhile, Democratic vice presidential candidate Tim Walz campaigned in Pennsylvania as well this past weekend, but Republicans are questioning which candidate he was promoting. The Minnesota governor's speech in Bethlehem touched on many liberal talking points, including the need for abortion and gun restrictions. At one point, he criticized Trump and J.D. Vance for wanting to instill fear in the public before bringing back his point to his running mate Kamala Harris. Quote, he said, quote, "She simply has said it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way. We can't afford 4 more years of this." He faced heavy backlash from conservatives for parroting Trump's line while being unclear about what the word "this" means. Others joked about it, saying Walz is right. We can't afford 4 more years under the Biden administration.
And speaking of Walz, he's currently prepping for his upcoming debate against Trump's running mate J.D. Vance next week. Campaign officials say he's currently prepping with Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg as a stand-in for Vance, as Buttigieg was praised for his debate skills during the 2020 Democratic primary. Walz says he expects a challenge, telling MSNBC, quote, "I fully expect that Senator Vance, as a U.S. Senator and a Yale law guy, he'll come well prepared." Meanwhile, Minnesota Representative Tom Emmer is helping Vance with his own prep sessions. That debate is scheduled for next Tuesday, October 1st, and will air at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on CBS News.
And before a quick break here, it looks like Montana residents cost the most in Senate race ad spending this year. According to Axios, Montana's per capita spending on Senate ads is the highest in history, with Democrats spending $152 and Republicans spending $129 on each eligible voter. Montana's Senate race will likely determine which party controls the Senate and whether Chuck Schumer will remain the majority leader. The nonpartisan Cook Political Report said earlier this month that the Senate went from a toss-up to lean Republican, paving the way for a potential Republican Senate majority this election cycle. Now, other 2 important Senate races include Nevada and Ohio, though political spending in those states pales in comparison to Montana. And up next, Israel continues its strikes in Lebanon and so much more after this break.
Fear and uncertainty can cause us to hold things tightly and rely on ourselves. But during uncertain times, as believers in Christ, we are called to surrender fully to our sovereign God. The call to surrender to Jesus is one step in our growth in holiness. And it doesn't just mean you give over a few things. It means He gets it all, including our finances, our investments. Learn a biblically responsible investment strategy proven over 25 years. Keep the money God has entrusted to you out of companies that participate in things that God detests. Fully surrender. Become a Financial Issues Partner today. Learn more by going to financialissues.org/join. That's financialissues.org/join.
Saving the unborn is one of the most amazing things that we can do in this day and age. Hi, my name is Shanna Burt, host of Financial Issues. Would you go to preborn.org right now? Consider giving $140. That will allow 5 young mothers to hear the heartbeat of their baby and change their mind to choose life over abortion. Go to preborn.org. That's preborn.org. It's an incredible ministry, Preborn. We're fighting back through saving tens of thousands of lives. And Preborn doesn't just save the baby. They ask these young mothers to go through a program of evangelism so that their eternal lives might be saved as well. Would you come alongside us for the kingdom, for the glory of Christ? Go to preborn.org. That's preborn.org.
welcome back to FISM News. I'm Renata Kiss. Well, let's start in the Middle East, where Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warned Lebanese residents yesterday to move out of harm's way as the IDF continues its mission against Hezbollah.
Now, starting this morning, the IDF has warned you to get out of harm's way. I urge you, take this warning seriously. Don't let Hezbollah endanger your lives and the lives of your loved ones. Don't let Hezbollah endanger Lebanon. Please, get out of harm's way now.
At the same time, Netanyahu said in a security assessment meeting in Tel Aviv that Israel isn't waiting for more attacks from Hezbollah. The IDF is proactively eliminating senior terror group leaders. The prime minister went on to say that he promised to change the balance of forces in the north, saying that's exactly what they are doing.
I promised that we would change the security balance, the balance of forces in the north. This is exactly what we are doing. We are destroying thousands of missiles and rockets that are directed at Israel's cities and citizens.
Despite the onslaught of IDF strikes, an Israeli official added that if Hezbollah agrees to a ceasefire in the north, the military will stop its offensive.
Meanwhile, as those strikes continue in Lebanon, the Pentagon announced plans yesterday to send additional U.S. troops to the region out of what they're calling an abundance of caution. Defense Department spokesman Pat Ryder told reporters the Pentagon is, quote, sending a small number of additional U.S. military personnel to augment our forces that are already in the region. Ryder said he was unable to provide more details for security reasons. Roughly 40,000 American troops are currently stationed in the region right now, with the U.S. maintaining a strong presence since the October 7th terror attacks in hopes of preventing a broader conflict.
And President Biden addressed the UN General Assembly earlier today in what will be one of his final appearances on the world stage, ending his presidential career when the world is at an inflection point, in his words.
My fellow leaders, I truly believe we're at another inflection point in world history. With the choices we make today will determine our future for decades to come.
President Biden called for diplomacy to end both the Gaza conflict and to avert a wider war in the Middle East. He said that a two-state solution in that region would strengthen the UN to deal with the threat of Iran and its proxies. He also spoke on the need to continue supporting Ukraine, but said Putin's war has failed to achieve his chief goals.
The news is Putin's war has failed and at his core aim. He set out to destroy Ukraine, but Ukraine is still free. He set out to weaken NATO, but NATO is bigger, stronger, and more united than ever before, with two new members, Finland and Sweden.
And speaking of Ukraine, the summit has been a major opportunity for Ukrainian President Volodimir Zelenskyy to drum up support for his new peace plan. He's already met with many other nations on the sidelines and addressed the assembly earlier today.
We are now preparing for the second peace summit, moving forward with our partners step by step according to the peace formula. And we are working on food security, energy security, and holding Russia accountable for its terror. Next, we will address all other points of the peace formula, including the release of prisoners, the restoration of territorial integrity, and more. And we are preparing a document to present at the second peace summit.
Zelenskyy says he will present his victory plan in full to President Biden on Thursday. He also plans to meet with Congress and both presidential nominees before he leaves the country. And amid the joint naval exercises of Russia and China in the Pacific, the Japanese Defense Ministry says Russia entered its airspace 3 times yesterday. According to the Japanese Defense Ministry, a Russian jet repeatedly intruded on Japanese territory, with each flyover lasting about 30 seconds to a minute. A warning flare went up after the third intrusion, which likely came at Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's recommendation, who told officials to respond firmly and calmly. A top government spokesperson said after the unwelcome event, quote, "The violation of our nation's airspace by a Russian military patrol plane is extremely regrettable." The spokesperson strongly advised Moscow against doing something like that again. Since the Ukraine war started, Japan's relationship with Russia has weakened as Japan imposed sanctions on Moscow.
And we have plenty more news coming up next. We'll be right back after Seth Udinsky with a moment in history.
Welcome back to A Moment in History. I'm Seth Udinsky. In the year 68 AD, Rome was on the verge of destruction. The Julio-Claudian dynasty, and that was the imperial family that had provided stability for the empire for the previous almost 100 years, was crumbling under the chaotic reign and then subsequent suicide of the Emperor Nero. Now, historians almost forget that there was an emperor, and actually several more, between Nero and the Emperor Vespasian, who took the throne in 69 AD. For less than a year, in one of the shortest reigns in the empire's history, Rome was ruled by the Emperor Galba. Now, Galba was almost the same age, actually, as Jesus Christ. He was born in the year 3 BC. Though Galba was part of the Roman aristocracy, he was not a familial member of the ruling Julio-Claudian dynasty. His political offices later in life were largely built on the foundations of his service in the Roman army. He commanded forces in Germania to the north as well as Africa in the south before finally becoming the Roman governor of Spain to the west. Now, all the while, Galba kept an eye on Rome. He watched as the unpredictable and unstable Nero fancied himself with the arts and largely cast aside his imperial duties at the expense of the empire's health. Historians believe that Galba was planning, with the help of several other Roman elites, some kind of imperial coup before Nero took his own life in the chaos of Rome in the year 68 AD, as we said before. So Galba traveled to the Eternal City, and with enough backing from Roman elites, he was crowned as the new emperor. Now, Galba's reign, which lasted hardly more than half a year, was plagued from the beginning by two chief factors. The first was his own personal uptightness, and the second was his inner circle's apparent corruption. He could never get the backing of the populace that he needed to really be an effective ruler, and his reign was marred by a rebellion that resulted in him losing the throne. In fact, the famous Roman chronicler Tacitus once ironically wrote of Galba's reign, saying this, quote, "It was everyone's opinion that Galba was capable of ruling the empire had he never ruled." Now, Galba was killed in the political battle for the throne in January of 69 AD. Thanks so much for joining me once again for A Moment in History.
Navigating through investment options can be challenging, especially when you're determined to uphold your God-given values. Every dollar you invest is a vote for the world that you want to live in. Let your values guide your investment decisions and help to shape the culture in which we live. Become a beacon of light and pave the way with biblically responsible investing. Timothy Plan, where faith and finance collide. Before investing, carefully consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of the investment company. This and other important information can be found in the fund's prospectus. To obtain a copy, visit timothyplan.com or call 800-846-7526. Read each prospectus carefully before investing. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal.
When a woman experiences an unplanned pregnancy, she's faced with a difficult decision. Preborn connects with life-affirming pregnancy clinics across the nation and provides them with free ultrasound sessions for expectant mothers. When a mother sees her baby on an ultrasound and hears their heartbeat, it doubles the chance she'll choose life. Visit preborn.com/life to save a baby's life.
Hey there, and welcome back to FISM News. I'm Samuel Case. We're going to kick off this segment here with some potential good news. That is, according to new FBI data, violent crime dropped by 3% in 2023, with murders in particular falling 11.6% year over year. That report comes less than 2 weeks after Donald Trump was fact-checked in his debate with Kamala Harris for claiming that violent crime is actually on the rise.
Crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime, and it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice
Excuse me,
President
the
Harris,
FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud.
Now, I say the latest report here is potential good news because Trump is actually right that recent FBI crime stats have been notoriously spotty. Just for example, here in 2022, New York and LA, both of them failed to submit crime data to the FBI, two of the biggest cities, by the way, as they struggled to comply with an updated system implemented in 2021. In addition, under that new system, there have been other problems as the FBI's data sets haven't always matched local police departments either. Another example, in 2023, the FBI undercounted the number of aggravated assaults in the city of Nashville by nearly 1,000. Crime analyst Jeff Asher summed up the situation following a separate release of FBI data sets earlier this year, saying crime almost certainly declined nationally last year, but said the FBI's data is also almost certainly overstating that decline.
At the same time, 9,000 soldiers have received training in so-called pro-life terrorists. Training slides were leaked this summer from Fort Liberty, North Carolina, that showed pro-life organizations and pro-life messaging as potential terrorism indicators. When Congress questioned Army officials on the slides, they received no clear answer. However, Congress now knows that over 9,000 soldiers have received pro-life training in the past 7 years. The Army has not taken any responsibility for it, nor do they seem to be willing to do so. Republican Representative Jim Banks said that in the light of this controversy, he will keep pushing the DoD to reject far-left politics and focus on fighting and winning wars. A new congressional meeting is set to take place on this issue next week.
Very concerning indeed. Speaking of Congress, meanwhile, however, Democrats are backing House Speaker Mike Johnson's latest stopgap spending bill. That bill would fund the federal government through December 20th and has no other legislation attached to it, unlike other versions of the bill, that is. Democrat leaders in both the House and the Senate voiced support for that deal on Sunday, but it is opposed by hardliners in the Rules Committee, which refused to vote on the measure last night. Representative Thomas Massey says the deadline right before Christmas will lead to Congress ramming through a giant omnibus bill later this year.
They love to pick the week before Christmas for this showdown because you can smell the jet fuel fumes over at DCA. It smells like Christmas. It's going to be the same old thing, warmed over, written behind closed doors, rolled out here. We're not going to have time to read this thing. That's also predictable. And we're going to be told, vote for this and you can go home and open presents with your kids. Don't vote for it and you're going to be stuck here.
Johnson is expected to bring it to the floor under a suspension of the rules vote. That means he'll need the support of House Democrats to reach a 2/3 majority.
And still in the economy, there is growing concern over what could be the most devastating supply chain disruption since the COVID-19 pandemic. FISM's Ian Patrick has the details.
The American economy is fretting over a major strike this week, which could disrupt supply chains shortly before the November election. For context, the International Longshoremen's Association is indicating that its tens of thousands of members would be going on strike if they do not finalize a labor agreement by October 1st. The group has been trying to negotiate a new agreement with the U.S. Maritime Alliance, as their current one expires after September 30th. Information regarding these labor discussions is difficult to specify, but the general points of consensus seem to be focused on job security and benefits. The ILA is seeking higher wages, better health care, as well as protected employment from automated processes. This labor contract is a big deal since it covers over a dozen ports along the East and Gulf coasts. John McCown of the Center for Maritime Strategy said the 5 largest ports just along that stretch brought in a combined value of around $2.7 billion in cargo, and that's accounting just for the month of August alone. So Needless to say, any disruption to that chain would cause massive backlogs around the world and generate more inflationary pricing. Despite these threats, it seems like the two negotiating groups cannot come to a consensus and have even frozen talks on the matter, at least according to some reports. And those reports led some to believe that President Biden would intercede, similar to how he did with the rail strike in 2022. In fact, trade and consumer groups had essentially begged the White House to guarantee that there would be no disruption of port operations despite these soured negotiations. But the White House decided not to intervene in these labor affairs, which Moody's Analytics economist Adam Kamens said, quote, rose the level of alarm for the situation. Fox News host Harris Faulkner further elaborates on this concern during a segment of her namesake program.
The administration says it doesn't want to interfere with collective bargaining. Well, that's a union thing, and we got a presidential election coming up, and Dems don't want to touch that. We get it. 45,000 workers from Maine to Texas could stop work starting October 1st. And this could cause big supply chain disruptions for the holiday shopping season.
Republicans have also since come out of the woodwork to demand that the Biden-Harris administration step in and do something to prevent the strike. The Labor Department has since offered help to the Maritime Alliance in finalizing a deal. According to Consumer Brands Association Vice President Tom Madrecki, nobody wants this strike to go forward, but Madrecki does warn that everyone has to be prepared for a strike, which he said will, quote, have a really serious impact on the economy. Jim Cameron, a columnist writing for the CT Mirror, even says that one day's strike would take 5 days to recover from. Fox Business reporter Lydia Hu gave more details on how the economy would be affected if a port strike were to actually take form.
East Coast and Gulf Coast ports handle roughly 43% of all U.S. imports. The top commodities impacted include autos and car parts. For consumers, a strike could mean higher shipping costs when prices are already elevated from the conflict in the Red Sea. Shipping costs currently 162% higher than they were just 1 year ago, and a strike could force them even higher.
Many have started scrambling to try and finalize a deal by the end of this week, and certainly before that October 1st deadline comes up. This is Ian Patrick reporting for FISM News.
Well, and that could certainly be disastrous right before the election coming up. I can't think of anything worse for President Biden than having the economy tank, and the Democrats, that is, right before the election. So we'll have to see if he does, in fact, intervene with this.
Right. It's definitely the last thing we need right now. And hopefully it won't happen, and hopefully the White House isn't just going to wash their hands.
But this has been the year of surprises, and there always is that October surprise, so maybe that's what this is.
Right. We'll see. All right, well, that's our program for today. Thank you so much for joining us. And we would like to remind you that FISM News is airing its final show this Friday, September 27th.
That's right. In case you haven't noticed, we're still airing the regular show all this week, but we will have a very special program to say goodbye on our last day on Friday. You don't want to miss that.
And we wanted to thank you for all your continuing support for the show. We ask that you would continue to support financial issues through FISM.
That's right. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.